This week on The Futurists, Charlie Melcher.
I'm a big believer that the world, at the age of linear, flat, fixed, and passively consumed stories is shifting over, giving way to an age where stories are going to be embodied, immersive, participatory, responsive, and social.
Hey there, folks. Welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tursick, and this week I am solo as the host. My partner in crime, Brett King, is a global traveler, and he's on a flight right now. But one of the things that Brett and I have been comparing notes on is how real-world events seem to be escaping our ability or transcending our ability to manage the narrative. We're starting to lose our grip on consensus reality, and everybody's kind of coming to their own conclusions. So what we seem to now have is opt-in reality. In a sense, the world that we're in is changing so very quickly, and we're all passengers on a train that's hurtling into the future at such a rapid pace, but we all have different perspectives on that future. And so we start to construct our own narrative, our own kind of personal meaning about what's happening to us. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes, though, that gives us a disadvantage, which is that we don't have the full perspective. And for that reason, from time to time on this show, we like to talk to people who think about storytelling and narrative as a means of constructing understanding of the world that we are in. We've had other guests in the past, like Michael Margolis, who is now applying storytelling architecture to venture capital and investment, which is kind of an extraordinary thing. We'll have him on soon. But this week, I wanted to tell you about someone who I'm super excited to have back because he was one of our very earliest guests on this show, and he is himself a futurist. He's been thinking about the future of storytelling for a number of years. So once again, a warm welcome to repeat guest Charlie Melcher, who is the founder and CEO of The Future of Storytelling. Charlie, thanks so much for joining us again on The Futurist. I'm happy to have you here.
Rob, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Now, the last time I spoke to you, you were organizing a trip to, I think it was the UK, and you invited me to join a group of elite people, like on a special behind-the-scenes like excursion to see some of the future of storytelling. Tell me a little bit about those adventures that you organized, because I think it's such a cool idea, and I'll bet a lot of folks listening would be interested to know about those.
Yeah, so this was an outgrowth for the future of storytelling when we had to stop the summit because of the pandemic. And all of a sudden we found ourselves locked in and not able to go out with our friends or go experience new things or meet new people. And we started these virtual trips during the pandemic where we would go around the world, meet the world's most interesting storytellers and get real-time streamed tours of their creations. And then once the pandemic was over, we realized we should be going and doing these things, not just watching them on Zoom.
So the old idea was you brought a bunch of people together for like a conference or a meeting, an event, and the pandemic disrupted that. So then you said, okay, we're going to do smaller groups, invitation only, and we can manage, kind of the hygiene around that if necessary. But instead, we're going to go inside the machine. We're going to go inside the places where the future stories are being made. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, when we couldn't go anywhere, we would actually pick up a local camera person, and then some genius creator would walk us through their creation. So, for example, Tokachi took us through Team Lab Borderless in Tokyo. And so he's walking through the space, and we have a camera person capturing it and zooming it to a private Zoom, feeding it into our private Zoom. And after a 45-minute walk and tour, he would sit down and we'd have this kind of roundtable conversation like we used to at Snug Harbor when we were doing the summit, but now it was in a private Zoom. And it created wonderful intimacy, and we got to feel like we'd gone somewhere in the world. And it was just really exciting to have
all from the comfort of your home, thanks to Zoom.
All from the comfort of your home, exactly.
But now you actually conduct these guided tours in person, right? So if someone's listening and they're interested, they could actually go to the Future of Storytelling and learn about your next excursion. What are some of the places you've taken people to?
This year, we went to Amsterdam, and we had an amazing 3 or 4 days there. We've been to Philadelphia for the pre-opening tour of Netflix House, which was amazing with Greg Lombardo. We went to New Zealand, and we got to meet with Richard Taylor from Weta Workshop, which was incredible, and all sorts of amazing things, Maori culture and Hobbiton and other amazing things out in New Zealand. We've also, over the years, done trips to Montreal, to London, to which we invited you on, to Scotland for the Fringe Festival. So anyway, we do
and in each of these places, what you're doing is you're actually going to, let's say, the headquarters or the office or the production facility of a group of people who are designing future narratives, right? That's what the purpose, so that's what the goal of the expedition is.
It's to find the people who are inventing the future, who are doing extraordinary work, who are making things that blow your mind. Sometimes it's very future oriented, very high tech. Sometimes it's something wonderful and traditional, like classic special effects with prosthetics or swords or leather work. Or I'm thinking of Richard of Weta Workshop, where it's really a workshop and they're making the things that appear in Avatar
Yeah.
or
Right, they're actually
Hobbiton or
making the
whatever.
props. It's not all digital. Now,
It's
the
not
folks
all
who are
digital.
listening to the show right now, at this point, they're going, "Gosh, I wonder if these guys can get a little more specific. That sounds interesting, but those are pretty vague." And so, I've got good news for the folks who are listening because Charlie Melcher is not a person who deals in dematerialized experiences. In fact, he is a person who deals in something I'm really, really personally passionate about. I am a gigantic book junkie. Any author who's been on my show knows that I read their books. I'll read as many of their books as I can before the show. I am a book junkie. And what I love about Charlie is that he is the genius behind some of my favorite books, whether they're books from entertainers like J.J. Abrams or great celebrities, personalities like Oprah Winfrey, who I used to work for. The through line on all of those is that these incredibly well-crafted coffee table books, they are books that are designed to attract you from across the room and elicit your curiosity and get you to engage with them and pick them up off the table. But all of these great books that I happen to have in my collection, I discovered one day to my delight, they're all produced by the same person, and he's the guy on the call right now, Charlie Melcher. So you're a book publisher, but you're kind of like a book producer, right?
Right. We
You
are
know what? Let me give an
we call
example. So
ourselves producers.
for the
Yeah.
folks, so you really do use that term. So for the folks who are
Yeah.
listening now, I'm holding up a copy of Charlie's new book. It's called The Future of Storytelling. I can't get it in focus. There it is.
There
Put it
you
right in
go.
front of my face. The Future of Storytelling. As you can see, it's got this like great cover that's full of interesting images that are intriguing. But that's not all. That's not all. It doesn't stop there. In fact, there's another cover, and it doesn't stop there. There's like a dozen different covers for this book. So it's sort of like before you even start reading the book, you can play with it and you can customize it and you can design your own cover for the book. So that's the future of storytelling. Easy name to remember because that's the person we're interviewing. Charlie Melcher is the CEO of the future of storytelling. Is the book in stores now?
It is. It is. It's published by Artisan and it released in November.
Super cool book. And so what we'll do in this show is we'll talk about some of the examples that you mentioned in the book, and they're so vividly portrayed with photography and diagrams and everything else. So for folks who are interested in the future storytelling, this is really the good stuff. I was blown away by the quality of it. I always am. I know it probably sounds like I'm hyping this. I don't hype books on the show. I don't. Every book I talk about is something that I personally read and enjoyed. Otherwise, I wouldn't speak about it. But what I do notice is the quality of most bound books has kind of gone downhill, particularly books published in the United States. And that's a function of the decline of publishing overall. There are still some countries, Japan notably, where they produce really exquisite art books. I happen to collect those as well, and I notice that quite a few of the very best, with the good color reproduction, the accurate color, high resolution graphics, and so on. Those are often published elsewhere on really high quality stock. But literally every book that Charlie publishes is an heirloom item that will be around for generations that you can pass on. Charlie, tell me about that. Tell me about your motivation to put this stuff in writing in a book, in a physical book form.
I started in publishing in college, so I have a long history of working with paper, with design, with writing, with images. I love going on press. I'm a huge fan of the mechanics of making books. So I've been involved in publishing for 30 years, and it was only about 15 years ago that I realized that my interests weren't just about paper and ink and binding, but actually about telling stories more broadly. So that led to us starting the future of storytelling. But I love that my career is grounded in the old-fashioned form of storytelling, one of the oldest forms of storytelling, which is the printed word.
Every time I go to New York, I'll visit a store like Strand, spend hours there. I get lost in the books, and I end up carrying home a whole suitcase filled with books, which unfortunately just accumulate on my shelves here because I've got such a backlog of books. You can't see it, but behind me there's a coffee table with at least 50 beautiful books on it. Two new Jenny Savile books. So I'm a fan of painting, and she's outstanding, and they're very high quality books. But a moment ago, you said something I think is really important, which is that you've expanded your thinking beyond printed books. and your understanding of storytelling has expanded beyond beyond the pages of a book, I should say, beyond the cover, what can be contained in the cover of a book. I think this is an important departure point for today's show, because if you do purchase Charlie's book, The Future of Storytelling, what you won't find is a lot of references to printed books or printed works. Instead, what you're going to find is a lot of experiences in the real world. And now, Charlie, that's an important differentiation. So give me a little bit more about your focus on experience, this idea of storytelling as experience.
Yes, so this came out of, well, honestly, comes out of being a curious person with a body, but I I think we all are trained to appreciate experiences because that's how we evolved as a species, to use all of our senses, to use our limbs, to have agency, to have embodiment, to live in the world. And one of the things I've always struggled with is that most of the ways we've consumed stories ever since the invention of the alphabet has been through our eyes and our ears. It's almost to the exclusion of all the other senses. And yet we understand the world through not just the five senses, but some scientists have suggested there are 30 different senses in the body or more. And all of those feed into our brain, into our understanding. Annie Murphy Paul wrote this wonderful book all about embodied cognition, and does a survey of all these wonderful scientists and shows that actually emotions originate in our bodies, and then our brain makes sense of that.
Yeah.
So I felt it's such a shame that most storytellers have only had access to a palette of like two colors. Not literally two colors,
The two
but like they're
sensations.
just two sensations. Well, what's happening now, and what I find myself is that when I'm in an experience that is a fully embodied, multisensory experience, it's much more powerful.
Yeah.
It's more
And you remember
emotionally
it.
resonant.
Because
And you
it's
remember.
embodied, you'll never forget it. It's an experience that you had, where I think, one of the things I find when we watch streaming, you're on Netflix and you're kind of binge watching a whole series, it just kind of all blends into one long linear narrative, and you sort of remember the characters and the premise and so forth, but you'll forget the key scenes and the dialogue not too long later. So in a way, we're so oversaturated with print media and with visual media that it causes a kind of instant amnesia, and it becomes very hard to recall how it was constructed. And so you can kind of have a residual memory, maybe what the gist of the story was and whether you liked it or not, but it's hard to recall specifics. Whereas for everyone who's listening, you can imagine that I'm sure half the people listening to the show have had some drastic experience in a snowstorm, whether it's a skiing incident or a driving incident or something else. But if you've been in a cold place where there's an extreme weather and you're trying to do something, you're going to have an embodied memory of that. And you can remember what you were wearing, where you were, and what the temperature was, and whether the wind was biting and howling and ice was cutting your face and so on. These are all experiences that fall away when you're watching somebody else portray it on a screen. The screens actually screen out half the story, I think. And this is an important
Mediate.
point for we talk about AI on the show all the time, Charlie. We have guests every other week who are coming in to tell us about what they're doing with artificial intelligence. And, there's a group of people who believe that we're going to build something like a general intelligence, an artificial general intelligence, and some say it'll be a super intelligence. In some ways, AI today outperforms human cognitive capabilities. So you can sort of see why they would make that argument. But I differ with those folks. And one of the reasons I differ with them is that the nervous system extends through the whole body. And like you said a moment ago, the perceptions from our body, hot, heat and cold, temperature, attitude, altitude, the angle that you're at, how much you're balancing and so forth, that ain't stuff that's going on through your eyes and ears. That's happening in your body. So embodied experience is lived experience. And the term you use to describe this is living stories. Now tell us all about living stories. Unpack that for the audience.
Sure. Well, I'd love to share a story. I had this experience some years ago at a Punch Drunk, the immersive theater company.
Yes.
They put on these amazing immersive theater shows in a building. They'll take over 4 stories of a building and build every room into an intricate set. And you wear a mask, but you get dropped into this space. And the only 2 rules are you're not allowed to speak, and you have to keep the mask on. But otherwise, you're free to wander anywhere. And different actors come into rooms and follow you. Or sorry, you follow them. People follow the actors.
So the
Or you
actors
can
are
just wander.
unmasked, and the audience has this anonymity. So the audience is all kind of generic masks.
Yeah, it's like you're invisible. You're like a ghost. So I was going to see this one called The Drowned Man, and I had flown to London for it. And I spent a couple of hours wandering around in this building, and it was amazing and so visceral and sensorial. And there, you can touch things and open drawers and hear music and all that. And I started to get tired. The jet lag was catching up with me. And just then, this young actress wearing this very tight leopard skin dress and ruby red lipstick, high heels. She walks into the room I'm in. And I think, okay, I'll stay a little longer and I'll see how she plays through. And so there are other ghosts, other of us guests sort of following her, and she's going from room to room. And then she ducks behind this door, and on a lark, I decide I'll follow her. And as I come through the door, she's waiting for me on the other side, and she shuts the door and she bolts it locked. And I'm like, uh-oh. And then
Uh-oh.
she motions for me to follow her down this little corridor into this dimly lit office. And once we're in there, she reaches up and she takes off my mask. And now my cloak of invisibility has been removed and I feel kind of exposed. And now it's just the two of us face to face. And she takes this mask, she hangs it on a hook and takes off the coat rack this Bogart sort of 1950s trench coat.
Mm-hmm.
And she puts it on me and she turns the collar up just so and ties the sash. And now she takes me down this other little corridor into a room and it gets darker and darker. And all of a sudden we're in pitch black and she lets go. And now I'm just alone in the dark and my heart speeds up and my ear, all my senses go on high alert. And then I hear action. And there's this loud noise and a flash of light and then another flash of light. And my eyes adjust to this staccatic light. And I realize I'm surrounded by 30 or 40 of these silver umbrellas, the kind that photographers use to diffuse strobes. And my eyes adjust and I see the actress and she's across the room and she's walking slowly towards me, but she's got this intensity in her eyes. And I think, is she crazy? Like, is she friend or foe? I start to worry that I might need to be prepared to defend myself against this woman. She looks so intense and she comes closer and her hand's coming up from my neck and I can't move. I'm frozen.
Wow.
And then her hand lands gently on my cheek. And then she takes another step forward, and now I feel the warmth of her body up against mine, and I can smell the sweetness of her perfume. Instinctively, my hands go around her waist.
Hmm.
And now I'm there in this room holding this young, beautiful starlet in my arms, and I realize I'm no longer afraid of her. Now I'm afraid of me.
Oh.
Like, what role am I willing to play here? I'm a happily married man, but I'm alone in this room with this young woman. She's looking up into my eyes and she leans up. Cut! I hear over the loudspeaker.
Fabulous.
And she stepped away and I'm shaking. Like every part of me is like activated. And I'm in the dark again. And then I feel her hand and she takes my arm and she takes me back into that little office and she undoes the trench coat and hangs it up and she takes the mask and she puts it back on my head and she's about to see me unceremoniously out the door. And she stops and she whispers in my ear, "I think you'd be great for the part."
Oh, that's a nice bit.
And I realized that I had been auditioning for the role of the leading man. I was in a scene that was put on just for me. And I loved it. I mean, literally, I walked around London the rest of the weekend with this hop in my step. I mean, I saw the city like it was a set for adventure waiting for me around every corner. And what that left me with, I mean, it's literally a story, obviously I've told before, but it's one I will never forget.
Yeah.
Because I went in as a passive audience member and I left having been an active participant in a drama that I was the hero of. I had been living that story. I wasn't watching it. I was participating in it. And it was like nothing else. I mean, I've love cinema. I've watched a million movies. Like no movie was as moving and exciting as that scene that I had just lived through.
And if time
so,
permitted, you could probably recall every detail, like what you were wearing and how you were standing and what it felt like and the temperature and the brightness of the lights and so forth. You've recalled a lot of that. You packed a lot of it into that story. And for the folks who are listening, that's the beginning of this book, The Future of Storytelling, that anecdote. And the book is filled with an immense number of examples, very clearly presented in Charlie's beautifully written prose. It's almost poetically described so that it's entrancing and fun to read the book. It's beautifully presented. but it's also the examples are so fresh and current, and they range from everything from like Minecraft and Baldur's Gate, like online games, to things like Disneyland or Burning Man or a shopping mall. And so these are things you can experience yourself, but his book is kind of like a guided tour to these things. Of course, Charlie's been accumulating these experiences for 15 years. Now, the term you used a moment ago, which I want to come back to because I think it's really a very important one for us for this show, is embodied. All right. And you actually talked about holding somebody else's body, the actress's body. You could feel her body heat, right? So you had that
Yes.
a kind of very literal version of being embodied. By that, though, what I'm trying to get to, and why I noticed that word, what I'm trying to get to is this idea that storytelling can be tangible. It can be tangible experience. And I think if you read books on a Kindle or if you stream Netflix or other kinds of streaming programming, it's disembodied, right? It's dematerialized, it's digitized, and therefore it feels evanescent. And somehow I think, in a way, it's devalued through that. Where the experiences you're talking about, these embodied experiences, they stay with you, right? You felt them, you lived them. So that's what you're describing as a living story.
Yes, I think a living story is one that has a handful of different characteristics. One is certainly embodiment. Another one is that it is you have agency. Like you have the opportunity to make decisions and act in the story. Another is that it's immersive, that you're inside some sort of world, a story world. Another is that it's responsive, meaning it understands who you are. It's personalized, or it's changing depending on who you are and how you show up. And then of course social, which I think is a very important piece of living stories as well. And if you have all those things, agentic, immersive, embodied, responsive, and social, it's so powerful that certain stories can literally be transformative.
Hmm.
Like that story I just told you. I will never forget it. I'm changed because of that story. So those are the characteristics that I define as part of living stories, and I devote a chapter to each one in the book.
Very cool. Now, let me go back and unpack the meaning of a couple of those terms because we've heard them here on the show, and folks in the technology industry use those terms in a metaphorical way to describe what they're doing, but sometimes they use them with a different meaning than what you intend. So let's start with agentic storytelling. So the term agentic, of course, is a very trendy term for 2025 and 2026 in the AI space. And there, what we mean is an AI that you delegate. You delegate some responsibility. The example would be an agent that can book travel for you, so it can actually go out and find the best flights and actually pay for them with your credit card, but you're not involved in that transaction. You've relinquished control or delegated authority to the AI agent. That's what they mean in the world of AI. But when you're talking about agentic storytelling, your meaning is quite different. In fact, I'd say it's probably the
Almost
opposite
the
of that
opposite.
because you're not delegating anything, right? The agency is conferred upon you as an audience member. So traditional
Yeah.
media typically makes us passive, right? Especially if we're watching a show or watching a film, we're sitting there. Your job is to sit there and watch. The entertainer's job, the producer's job is to make the show and entertain you. But what you're describing is kind of co-creation, where the audience is enlisted in the act of participating, the act of creating the story. Without that audience, there'll be no story. There'd just be half the show would be the audience, the show, the cast, I suppose, but none of the
Right.
audience. And so this is an interesting thing, right? Because the show doesn't exist until you show up, and that's the agency that you're talking about. You take action.
Exactly. And I think it's one of the things that I've always struggled with traditional storytelling media, which is that we truly, our only role is to sit and listen
Mhm.
or watch. And
Mhm.
we don't get to play. We don't get to have a role. And I think that the explosion of the web, social media, having phones, like all of these things have trained us to believe that we can create, that we have a voice, that we can share and make. And then you go and sit in front of a television or movie screen and you're just mute and dumb and,
Yeah.
passive. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that that's a natural state. I don't believe
Mass
that
media
people,
conditions us. It's a form of conditioning that gets you to become passive, right? And we see this reflected in our politics. So we're not just speaking metaphorically here. People are being conditioned to become passive and just sort of watch the world roll by the same way it rolls by on a screen. Okay, let's go back to another one of the words you mentioned. Immersive, a word that is somewhat overused with new media
yeah,
these days. Unfortunately, it's an excellent word, so it does describe it. But we've had a number of guests on our show here talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality, digital twins of various sorts. And while those are all interesting, to me, they all still remain in that zone that I call perpetual sunrise. The sun never really fully rises. It's like perpetual dawn. Personally, I would love it. I think those are cool experiences. But what I know is that hardware is hard. The devices aren't really ready at this stage, even today, with the advances from Apple's Vision Pro and the massive investment by Facebook or Meta into building out the Meta Quest headsets. Those are incredible increases in power and ability and resolution since 2017. So big advances, huge billions of dollars invested in it, and yet it still falls short. So if you use those devices, what your primary sensation is that your neck hurts because you got this heavy thing on your head. No one likes to put their head in a bucket, no matter how cool the experience is. That's a very disorienting thing, to pull something that covers your face and blind yourself in order to get into another world. So there's some pretty big psychological and physical barriers to immersive media. But what you're describing, again, isn't necessarily something that happens in a headset or something with a head-mounted display. You're talking about a theatrical experience that you can walk into, stand up, walk around, peer around the corner, follow the actress behind the scenes, as you described. Tell me more about that concept of immersion, because I think that's quite a different usage than we've heard on this show before.
Yes. So I do agree with you that the word immersive has been overused and to some degree has lost a lot of value because of it. What I mean by immersion here is the ability to create an immersive world, to create a world that's filled with a set of possibilities, right? In nonlinear storytelling, it's the world building that allows for the story to be discovered or co-created and unfold. So this can be in a virtual world, or it can be in an analog world. For example, the one I was describing with Punch Drunk, a very beautiful, very richly detailed world that you could wander through. It can also be absolutely in a gaming engine or a virtual world. So, but for me, the secret to this is that it's not just physically immersive, because in some people use immersion, what they really mean is like, oh, it's something that goes 360 around you. I think that for there to be real immersion, the kind that we aspire to in living stories, you need to not just have that physical immersion, but also a kind of participatory immersion and an emotional immersion. If you can do all three of those things, then you've really been able to transport somebody, to make it believable, to put them, mind, body, and soul in the experience. And so I create a little chart of immersion suggesting that there's almost like a scale of immersion, a way to judge or to rank different types of experiences to their level of immersion. But ultimately, the reason you're doing that is because just like in any great world building, it's the world that then helps to allow for a set of possibilities for you to create and discover story.
So for the folks who are listening, what Charlie's describing is presented in his book. It's a chart that he calls the scale of immersion. And essentially, it talks about three different paths to creating an immersive experience and the ability for the producer to kind of dial up the intensity of each one. And that's why it's a scale. And those three paths are, let me think about this. So there's the physical element, right? So you're not just sitting there watching with your eyes or listening with your ears, but you're actually in it with your body. So that piece. There's an emotional connection, and you described that quite eloquently in your story about Punch Drunk, and this participatory notion that we've been toying around with. Okay, folks, we have to take a break right now. So hang on tight, because we'll be back with Charlie Melcher and more about the future storytelling after this. You're listening to The Futurists. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a minute.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurists podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, and Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
Hey, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tersick, and this week I'm talking to Charlie Melcher. Charlie's an old friend of mine from New York who has been focused on the future of storytelling for 20 years, and he's traveled all over the world to find the very best experiential stories that are being made. Now, we talked about traveling around the world. We talked about going to places, and I want to get into a topic that's related to that and kind of like hinges on this notion of an embodied story, and that is placelessness versus a place. Just before the break, you were talking about world building. Now, this is a term that's very important these days for franchise films and franchise movies and TV shows. This is a key concept. You have a world that's so interesting, people want to come back and see different stories and follow different characters. For folks who are listening, you can easily envision this with Star Wars. You can imagine the Marvel universe, so that there's numerous characters, lots of different stories to be told, but it's a place you want to keep coming back to. Those are imagined places, right? Those are imaginary places that don't exist in the real world. They're just artfully built by a team of experts over decades of hard effort. So that's the construction of a world. And I think the digital equivalent or extension of that is virtual worlds, the kinds of things you might experience in Fortnite, Minecraft, or the many other immersive video games, persistent world games where thousands, sometimes millions of people participate in those worlds, but they do so with an avatar. So it's not really them. It's like their representative, slightly detached, a little bit mediated, less embodied, and therefore less kind of experiential than what we're describing elsewhere. But now I want to talk about real world imagined worlds or real world building. So, Charlie, in your book, you talk about things like Burning Man, Meow Wolf, and South by Southwest. So if you could tell me a little bit about some of the examples from the book where world building has occurred in the physical world at a place where you can go, like Westworld recreated for HBO at South by Southwest.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything more powerful than to be able to enter into a physical world that's particularly something like Westworld, right? Where you're bringing back a beloved franchise that you've watched, and now you get to play in that world. You get to live in that world. You get to literally smell it and taste it and feel it. It's complicated. It can be expensive to do. But when those kinds of things get built at a high level, get produced at, with high production values and great attention to detail, they're absolutely transformative. They're mind blowing. People, I mean, I think about Meow Wolf and their great spaces that I think there are 4 or 5 of them now around the world.
Amazing. It's like walking through an acid trip. It's astounding to me. But tell folks who are not familiar with Meow Wolf, give them a short description of what it is, where it is, and what they would experience.
Sure. Well, the classic is the original one in Santa Fe. It's called the House of Eternal Return. It was built in an old bowling alley, which I love. I'll get back to that in a minute. But you enter in, you see what looks like the front of a picket fence in a normal house. You walk into the house and there's no one there. It's empty. There's papers, there's photographs on the wall, the television's playing. You're sort of looking around, pulling out drawers, trying to figure out what happened here. What's the story? Who are the characters? And then you're in the kitchen and you open the refrigerator and it's a portal. White light floods through and it's open space, and you step into the refrigerator and you're going through a time warp, and you literally enter into a world where nothing is the way you knew it.
No, and on the other side, like at least when I did it, on the other side, you get through the refrigerator, you go through like a white tunnel. It's like 2001 Space Odyssey. And on the other side, you look up and there are these giant aliens, and like the scale of the room is so vast. And you're like, wait, I was just in a Victorian house. It was a perfect reproduction of a Victorian house. And just by crawling through this tunnel in the fridge, I'm now in this world with these
I'm having an acid
alien creatures towering above me. It's so great because they mess with your sense of like physical scale, your sense of self.
Yeah.
So that's Meow Wolf. Immersive experiences, and they're place-based, they're entertainment, very much so. You can have an event there, you can have a family gathering there if you wanted to. People book them for parties. The one you're talking about is built in an abandoned bowling alley in Santa Fe, and actually the benefactor there is George R.R. Martin, the author of the Game of Thrones books.
Game of Thrones. Yeah.
He was so enamored of what they were doing with experience and story in the future storytelling that he sponsored that. But since that time, they've actually been quite successful. They've launched Meow Wolf experiences in Denver and Las Vegas and many other places. Tell me a little bit about those, because they're quite different from the House of Eternal Return.
each one has its own sort of story world that they're building out. So they're not the same, but they have the same underlying principles, which is that they take you on this physical journey where you are everything that you know is no longer familiar. They're filled with creativity and color. They use a huge troupe of artists to create these rooms and these spaces. They're almost all very physical. They play with intentionally. They don't do things according to code. So like steps don't have the same normal risers to them. They're often not right angles in any spot. Like they're intentionally trying to mess with your very safe world that you come out of. You know, our world is constructed in a way so that people don't fall when they go on steps, or they have railings, or everything is done to protect you and have consistency. And this place is designed to mess with all of those expectations and to show you that it's possible to see the world in a whole new creative light.
You kind of step
and I
out
love
of your
that about
conventional
them.
existence and into a different,
Exactly.
an imagined existence. They're never done, so they're a little bit like the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, in the sense that they're constantly under construction. Like you said, there's an army of artists that are working full time. When I was in the one in Santa Fe the first time, there was a Zydeco room, which was kind of cool. It was like a New Orleans house, it was all covered with bricolage. And someone said to me, just 2 weeks ago, this was like a Victorian dollhouse in this room. They completely ripped it out and renovated it overnight and then replaced it. So there's reason to come back again and again. But that's like hearing a great story told again and again. A great storyteller is going to modify it based on the audience, based on time and his own personal or her own personal transformational journey. Okay, so that's Meow Wolf. Now let's talk about the Disney World things. This is actually, we had this conversation. You really wanted me to go to Walt Disney World, and I didn't do it because I wimped out. I should have gone. I should have taken the opportunity. But you were like, hey, they have this immersive experience where you're going to be on a Star Wars vessel and you can actually be part of the show. And I was like, doesn't sound like it's for me. I should have done it. Tell me all about what I
Should have done it. Here, I'm going to show you a picture from the book.
Oh, great.
That's me in an Obi-Wan Kenobi outfit.
That's great.
With one of the
Obi-Wan Melcher.
So there you get to actually live in world, and you are on the conceit is that you're on a cruise ship, an intergalactic cruise ship, and it gets taken over by the First Order. They sort of take over the ship. There's the rebels and the First Order, and there's a whole story that plays out, and you get drawn into that story as deeply or as lightly as you want. You can just sort of watch it in the climactic scenes that happen, or you can literally start texting with the characters and go down these deep rabbit holes of intrigue and participation.
Cool. So similar to your story about the Drowned Man experience in London, you can engage with the actors one-on-one and they'll deal with you. They'll respond to you, like you'll get their attention, which is cool on one hand, like, wow, I don't get that kind of experience in mass media. But secondly, it's deeply weird, right? Because now suddenly you're in the show and you're on. You have to be like doing something in character, right?
I'm working with them, and I've got assignments, and then there's food, and it's all in world, and there's a Star Wars bar, and we're having
you
drinks.
Actually stay on the spaceship, right? You're part of the story for a couple of days.
Yeah, you live there. It's a hospitality. It's like being on a cruise ship, really. But you don't actually move. But you think you do because you look out the windows and you're in space, and the planets are going by, and it's all beautifully synchronized. ILM, the same people who did the special effects for the Star Wars movies, created the special effects for the all of the things you see outside the quote unquote windows, which of course are LED screens.
It's funny, you reminded me, back when I was designing online games in the mid-1990s, we were looking at real-world phenomena where people form organizations and groups and troops, and one of the phenomena we were looking at was live-action role-play games, where it's like, okay, you're this character, I'm this character. It's a little bit like a grown-up version of the way kids play in a schoolyard, where they kind of cast each other in roles, and then they go stay in character and perform. And we were like, gee, I wonder if we can recreate that dynamic on the web. And funny enough, we tried to do it in Disneyland. So we went down to the Disneyland here in California. And what we wanted to pay attention to there was the intense care that world is constructed with. The great thing about Disneyland and what sets it apart from all other theme parks is that even down to the level like the nuts and bolts, somebody designed every inch, every millimeter of that surface so carefully with so much care and attention. And that's probably consistent with most of the experiences you have in the book, where they have not just been conceived in an original and bold way, but that the idea has been carried out to the utmost extent. I think that's one of the yardsticks you use to measure the events that you include in the books is the attention to care and quality, the integrity with which they're expressed.
Absolutely. It's so in addition to the 7 chapters that are in the book, there are almost 50 of what I sort of think of as canons. They're they're my favorite examples of immersive experiences from around the world and across media. And they are beautifully rendered. I mean, these were chosen intentionally by me, not just because they're really well done immersive experiences, but also they're visually spectacular. We were able to find great photos of each of them and share 2 to 6 pages of little breakouts about each. So I think people will use this book not just as a inspiration to understand how the world is changing of storytelling, but also as a guide to things that they want to go do and see, and as a visual reference for inspiration for design, set design, all sorts of creativity, because the quality that these people have used to build these worlds is just extraordinary. It's so fun to look at.
And then there's the level or depth of commitment, right? So some of the worlds you're talking about, hey, it's just a theater experience. It's an afternoon, it's an evening, no problem. That's low commitment, right? Even though they might be quite challenging when you're in them for a period of time. But even that level of intensity in the back of your mind, yeah, but after this, I'm going to go out and get dinner and I'll be fine. That's not true for certain things. Like I would say Burning Man is probably considered a pretty high commitment immersive experience in the sense that you have to go out to Black Rock. You got to drive out there. There's no place to get, there's no easy way to get there, right? You got to stay there. Right? You got to figure out your food and water and so forth. And you're in that world. And what's cool about it is you're in a group, in a world with tens of thousands of other people who've made that same commitment. And it's a commitment to personal transformation. Now, previous societies had this baked in, right? So if we think about pre-industrial societies, there were rituals of maturation and rituals when you transform from a child to an adult, where you have to go out in the wilderness or have to go out and find your spirit animal or your guide or have a dream or, drink this substance or something. But you had to go through a ritual of transformation. And to my mind, that's one of the great appeals of things like Burning Man, the idea that you have to go there and experience this transformation, not by yourself, not solo, not in the wilderness, the way I like to go hiking in the Sierras by myself. That's transformative in its own way. But this is a collective, right? This is a group experience. It's sort of what we had in movie theaters when people went to movie theaters, except you're the story, you're the world, right? So talk to me a little bit about Burning Man, because that's also included in your book. You're considering that a storytelling.
I do. I think of it as an amazing example of collective world building, right? Mm-hmm. Because literally the whole plot is sort of built up. It's everybody has this full commitment. I mean, you think about the costumes, the way people dress, the gifting. It has its own set of rules. It's almost like its own physics, right? There's a whole set of social interaction rules that change the way you show up and interact with people, which is great design. It is a collective social experience. As you were saying, we have this sense of awe that comes when you're with a huge group of people going through a ritual like watching the man burn. And it is of all of the ones, honestly, that are in the book, it's probably the one that's most transformative. Yeah. I mean, I know people who come out of Burning Man and there's this element that's called bleed, where you go into a story world, you play a different role, you're empowered to play a different character, which, by the way, also happens for people. You've got your lawyers and your doctors who are very buttoned up by day, and then they go to Burning Man and they let their hair down and they're free to discover other parts of their own personality and character, because the rules are different here. And then that discovery ends up staying with them when they leave and go out into, quote unquote, the real world.
That's the ritual transformation fully conceived, right? So you go to this place, okay, cool, I'm going to go to Burning Man. Yeah, I rented a van, I got my food and stuff. And then you have this profound shift. And when you come back, you're going to return the van to the rental place and you're going to go back to your day-to-day life, but that shift stays within you. And I think this is at the essence of what we're striving for with experiential storytelling. What we're trying to get to is to help people achieve that more and more and more. Charlie, I want to divert to a story here that's totally tangential to what we've been discussing. But I was reading it this morning, and as I was getting ready for the show, I was reading this over coffee, and I thought, oh, I want to bring this up, and you just gave me a perfect opportunity to it. This idea of stepping over a threshold of experience that's going to profoundly change who you are. I want to start this out by framing it like, what's the point of stories? Why do we tell stories? And my belief is that we tell stories to create meaning, to construct meaning in our lives, because otherwise life is just a meaningless series of incidents that we're responding to. When we come home at night, someone says, what happened today? And you say, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. Let me tell you what happened. You're recapitulating those random experiences in a sequence that has meaning and structure. And so what you're doing is you're actually processing that and building meaning in your life by doing it. The story I read this morning at breakfast was a story of a woman who broke up with her boyfriend and discovered that she was bisexual. And so the story was her experience as a bisexual woman. 6 years later, she recapped her experience. And one of the things she said is there's profound resistance all the way around. First, there's all the people that she knew before who knew her as a heterosexual woman. And then they were kind of like shocked and had to recalibrate to understand her in this new way. But then there's also the people in the queer community who, frankly, were like, well, you're just slumming. You're just a tourist in this zone. We don't really believe you're fully gay. And so she had to overcome that kind of resistance and enter that group and gain acceptance, like a new tribe, right? But she said the hardest one for her and the most profound change was her own internal biases and conditioning that she had been raised with, that she had been drummed into her as a child. These were everything from values and religious beliefs and cultural contexts that she had to set aside and put aside so that she could make space for this new experience and understand the new meaning of it. Now, I realize that's kind of a left turn from what we were talking about, but I think this is an important point, and it's what I wanted to get to in today's show in closing, which is that the future of entertainment, the future of media, and the future of storytelling is deep experience. It's not just experience that you enjoy, savor it like a gourmet, but instead it's experience that's profound and transforms you. It transforms you in ways that you will no longer fit in your old shoes. You can't go back to the way things were. It's kind of like that hero's journey, where the journey, begins with the hero is an ordinary world and there's a call to action. And then that person, he or she has to go on a quest and, fight some villains and surmount some challenges and come back with a boon that's going to help the community that she came from or he came from. And in the process, that hero is permanently transformed and they just can't go back to the ordinary world. They're now a different person. Ultimately, that is the story of adulthood. That's the story of becoming a fully realized human. And what you're describing then as the future storytelling is the ability to commodify that process, that transformation process, and help lots of people achieve it. Maybe not on a mass scale like broadcast television does, where it just gets us all and turns us into kind of robots on a couch where we're sedated and passive, but on an individual scale, where one by one we're going through our transformative journeys and having these experiences, large or small. Could be something that just happens in an afternoon or an evening. This could be something big where you go out on an expedition. Charlie, if you don't mind, respond to that and help me understand your vision of the real future, like the future ahead. What lies in the future of storytelling?
Well, I just want to start by saying how much I agree with you that storytelling it's not just about meaning. I think it's also about self-awareness, right? You learn about yourself through stories. We define ourselves through our own stories. And what's amazing about immersive experiences when done correctly is that they allow us to expand our own definition of self. Mm-hmm. They let us play other roles. We get to literally walk in other people's shoes and see what that feels like in a safe way. Whereas the world has conformed to keep us in a certain box.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden we get to step out of that box, play a different role, and decide whether that's part of who we are also. So I'm really very passionate about how storytelling is ultimately both a mass thing and an incredibly internal thing at the same time. But to answer your question about where are we headed, I'm a big believer that the world, at the age of linear, flat, fixed, and passively consumed stories is shifting over, giving way to an age where stories are going to be embodied, immersive, participatory, responsive, and social. And frankly, because everything we've just said, they're so much more powerful and memorable. It's night and day. It's like black and white versus color. I mean, there's no question that if you had the choice between being in a story and feeling it in every sense of that word versus sitting back and watching one, you would most people would ultimately choose to do the one that they get to feel and embody. And there's another huge outcome from this, which I maybe is a good way to end, which is if you do spend your whole life from the very youngest ages having stories that are read to you or stories that you consume passively, and in every one of those stories, your role is zero. There's no way to impact the outcome of that story. All you can do is watch it unfold or listen to it unfold. Think about how you're going to show up in the real world and your sense of agency in the real world. Does that make you feel like you can change the world? Now imagine a world where every story from your earliest childhood was something that you got to be the hero in, that you and your friends and your family got to play through and figure out together how to solve or resolve or win or just have an extraordinary experience together. When you're used to playing those kinds of stories and then you show up in your real life, you're going to have a very different approach to the problems that we face as a world. And so it gives me great hope to believe that as we live our stories, we will learn the skills to together overcome the biggest problems that we face.
What a powerful way to conclude this interview. Oh, Charlie, such a great pleasure to hear from you. Thank you for sharing that bit. I think it's a very important point. I'm passionate about the power of storytelling and this kind of transformative experience we've been describing. Where can people find out more about you and the future of storytelling?
Please visit our website at fost.org. I also have a podcast, which you've been very kind to be on, so thank you. And so they can look to the Future of Storytelling podcast. And then please go out and get the book. I think if you enjoyed this conversation, I think you'll enjoy the book. And that's available wherever books are sold.
Yes, I've enjoyed the book.
It has 12 covers.
Yes, you're never going to be bored with that book on your coffee table. Charlie, thank you so very much for joining us on The Futurists. So here we have all the different storytelling covers. That's great fun. Good. For the people who are listening and can't see it, Charlie's just unfolded all the choices of possible story covers for the book, The Future of Storytelling. So check him out at fost.org. Charlie, thanks for joining us on The Futurists, and I look forward to seeing you next time I'm in New York.
Thank you,
folks,
Rob.
This
Thank
is
you
The
so
Futurists.
much.
I'm Rob Tersick, and I'm the host of the show with Brett King. And each week, we'll bring you another guest who is working on their version of implementing the future that they envision, just like Charlie on today's show. So we'll see you in the future. Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.